Hi guys. So I just wanted to come on here and say I was reading the word yesterday and I was in Esther chapter 2. And what I got from it is basically, even if we seem like we're in a place of captivity, we seem like we're in a prison, maybe it's supposed to feel like a trap. I think if we have our eyes on God, if we continue working as if it's to please God, then those moments may not feel like being trapped or being in prison. Like with God, there is still liberty and freedom, whereas other people may have the viewpoint or perspective of being held captive. And I was in Esther chapter 2 yesterday, and this is how I got this. After these things, I'm starting from verse 1. When the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hege the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. And so back in verse 6, it says, who had been carried away from Jerusalem. They're talking about Mordecai, and I presume the rest of his family as well. They had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. So basically what that's saying is King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon came to Jerusalem, took it over, and made the people captive. And these Jews, specifically Mordecai and his family, Esther, who he adopted, they were the captives, and they ended up in Shushan the palace. Now Mordecai, it says in verse 5, if we go one verse up from where we just were, now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew. So Mordecai is in the palace. But also they come to this land previously being captive. Well, do they count as still being captives? Maybe they still count as being captives. But Mordecai is in the palace, and now they're in this land at a time where the previous queen, Vashti, was deposed for disobeying the king, and they are looking for fair young virgins to become the next queen, for one of them to become the next queen. And Esther qualifies, and she's a fair young virgin, and so she's eligible for marriage. And so she gets sent to the palace for the purification things and the beauty rituals, all the preparations that it takes to meet the king. And like I mentioned, despite having been captive before, they are brought into the palace. And sometimes, I'll say this, sometimes I think a lot of us as humans were like, well, a palace can't be that bad. She gets to be near a king. She gets to be near people in power, and they rule the country. They decide all the rules. So that can't really be a place of captivity. But I'll say this. The extent of my knowledge of palace living probably stems from dramas and TV shows, most of which show that a palace may be made of gold and silver and fine art and nice drapery and whatnot. But you have a lot of people vying for power. They're either trying to get the king's favor, or they may want to overthrow the king so that they can come into power. So there are a lot of political schemes. If it was a palace where maybe consorts or concubines were allowed, I know this is huge in Chinese dramas, but they try to like stop the others from getting pregnant because they don't want someone else's child to become heir. And so there's more political scheming like that. And I want to say in some places, in some countries, some nations, if you marry the king and he dies before you, you're not allowed to like remarry. You're forced to just stay in the palace until you're old and dead. I don't know if that's all nations, but probably a good majority. Once you're the king's woman, like the palace is your world. And you have certain responsibilities in there. Just because it may be made up of like gold and silver and jewels, it doesn't make it the best place. It only, it's more like a shallow, it's surface level beauty, but the beauty of the jewels doesn't make up for political schemes and having your life on the line every day. I don't know what this palace life was like, but we see in the word that Esther had favor. Mordecai was working in the palace. So to me, that doesn't sound like he was being treated as a slave. And this actually reminds me of Joseph back in the book of Genesis. Let me see. Where was this? Chapter 39. I'll start reading at verse 20. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. And so here we see Joseph is put in charge of all the prisoners. He's a prisoner himself, but he's put in charge of all the prisoners. And the keeper of the prison guard, he trusted Joseph to do his work because the Lord was with him. That means he was diligent, and he was basically doing his work as if he was pleasing God, not necessarily to please man. And because of that, God's favor was shown through the prison guard and poured onto Joseph and everything that he did. And so that's not to say that times won't be hard, that there won't be some instances where we may struggle or wonder like, God, why am I here? What is the purpose of this? And we may not always see the purpose, but when we keep our sights focused on God and when we do work for him, as if we're trying to please him and not trying to please others around us, then his favor can pour out, his favor and his mercy can pour out in such a way where it doesn't even have to feel like we're in captivity. And so I think that's what it means to truly have freedom in Christ, where we can be in absolutely any place, a pit, a prison, or a palace. That's basically the journey that Joseph went on, and God was with him through all of it. Have a good night.